All right. Hello, I'm Jaemie.
And I'm Vanessa.
And we are low-key obsessed. So today we're talking to Rebecca. And Rebecca, you're an Enneagram expert. So how did you get into that?
Okay, well, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was out for lunch with a friend, and she mentioned this thing called Enneagram that was all about personalities. And I'm a coach, so I work with parents and youth and couples and individuals. And I went and I looked it up, and I'm the type of person who gets low-key obsessed with all kinds of things. Yeah. And so I searched it up, and I kind of did a test online, and it was just so comprehensive and just kind of pinned me down right away in a way that I was very uncomfortable with, because that's kind of what the Enneagram does for you, is it shows you the things about yourself
that you don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah. And then I just started doing all of the reading and researching I could and listening to podcasts and all of that. And then I decided to go and get certified in coaching with it, because it was just becoming so handy in my professional life.
Yeah. So if people aren't familiar with Enneagram, so it's a personality test, and then like how do you kind of like use that or apply it, or what kind of like the elements of Enneagram?
Right. So the Enneagram, it's not a personality test.
Okay.
It's a personality profiling tool.
Okay.
Is kind of the nicer way to say it. It's not a test, because it's not putting you in this box of like, oh, here's your personality description. Yeah. It's more about showing you the motivations that make you do and think and feel the way that you do. And so Ennea in Greek means 9, and gram is diagram. So that's kind of where the name came from, 9-pointed diagram. And it's 9 perspectives on how to see the world. So of course there's not only 9 personality types in the world, but think about it as colors. How many shades of blue are there when you go choose a paint color, right?
Yeah.
Like there's hundreds of them. So, but there's 9 base sort of perspectives on how you see the world. And then when you can understand how you see the world and understand how your loved ones or your friends see the world, then you can start seeing from different perspectives. And if you ever do like assume what people are thinking about you, or they do something and it kind of bugs you and you don't understand why they did it and it really bothers you, and you're kind of making an assumption about that action, this can really help you understand why they might have an action that doesn't make sense to you, right? It just brings more compassion, more understanding, better relationships, and more connection with both yourself and with everybody around you.
So are you like one type, or?
Yeah, so you are one type. However, mistyping is very common, because you can sort of live out strategies of all of the types, especially if you are living from a place of kind of unhealth, or maybe you've experienced a lot of trauma, and so you're using coping mechanisms from other types. So a lot of people mistype at first, but that's all kind of part of the journey, and it's actually okay to mistype, because if anything, it shows you even more down the road who you are. It's a slow journey in really understanding yourself and bringing your that self-awareness.
So there's like a healthy state of being and like an unhealthy state.
Yeah, sort of. So there's sort of resourceful strategies and unresourceful strategies that we all use to get through in life, right? To cope in this world. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how have you incorporated kind of Enneagram in your coaching now, would you say?
Well, I use it every single day. I typically do a typing interview with all of my clients in the first couple of sessions, and then I give them like a profile of their type after we nail down what their type is. And then we really just take them on a journey through their type and how their type structure plays out, because you're going to start understanding what your defense mechanisms are, what your focus of attention is, what your core longing and core desires and core fears are, and how that then plays out in your relationships, which is one of the most common reasons why people come to coaching or to counseling, right? Yeah. So when you can understand what your core longing is and what your motivations are, then you can start to see it and separate it from a little bit. And we call that accessing your inner observer. So when you can access your inner observer, you can step back from sort of being blended from the thing that you're doing and notice yourself doing it, and then check in. Ooh, do I need to be doing that right now? Or am I just doing that because it's making me feel safe? Or I'm just because it's getting me what I want. Right? And you can check in and then slow down your reaction time, create more of a response than a reaction, which is going to bring so much healing to all of your relationships, right?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, the more you can access that inner observer and just really step back, then the more freedom you really have in your day-to-day life.
Yeah,
Sure. Like pretty much just getting to know yourself and how you react to certain situations.
Yeah, and then knowing that that's how you react to your certain situations that really trigger you, and how somebody else might react to situations that might trigger them. So you two are two different types, and so you are going to have completely different perspectives and responses on the same situation. So you could be sisters who grew, which you're not, but you could be sisters who grew up in the same home, but because you have two different types, different things are going to affect you in different ways, right?
Totally.
And your responses are going to be based off of that. So when you can then access that observer, step back, take a breath, and realize, okay, I'm really living out of a type structure here. And it's not bad to do that, but you can ask yourself, do I need to? Is that the best choice for me right now? Are there other tools that I can use instead? Right?
No, it's funny you say that because me and my sister actually have that dynamic where like things that bother her don't bother me at all. And that's like a major source of conflict for us. Because like, especially in text messages, like she'll be like, I don't care about this. And I'll be like, cool, she doesn't care. And what she means is like, I care a lot, but she like wants me to be in tune that she cares a lot. And now I am. But like, because I wouldn't react that way, I'm always like, yeah, like she's fine. She thinks it's cool. And then she'll be like, no, I haven't talked to you in a month. And I'll be like, oh, cool.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll totally miss it unless like now I'm working on it of being like more in tune with like different things or we're going to react differently to different things.
Yeah,
and different
you can
things
be
are
more
gonna be
understanding.
Important. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. In the Enneagram world, well, not just Enneagram, but in this kind of world, we call that the shadow.
Oh, okay.
So your shadow self is this idea of, when, like what you just said with your sister, sometimes somebody does something that really bothers you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bother the person beside you.
Yeah.
And you're like, why does this bother me so much?
Yeah.
Right? Typically, that's because it's part of your shadow. Usually, what that means is because the shadow follows you around, but it's kind of hiding, right?
Yeah.
Is there's something about this situation that bothers me about me,
okay.
right? So, an example of that. Can I give an example?
Yeah, of course,
okay?
yeah.
So I was sitting in a team meeting not that long ago with a coworker, and there was a coworker who was just kind of grumpy. She was in a bad mood that day. And it was kind of bothering me because I was just like, come on, like, it's a team meeting, just deal with it, get through it. You don't have to have a bad attitude. And then she named us, or she didn't even say sorry. She just said, I'm in a bad mood today. And I got really triggered and I was really frustrated and nobody else seemed bothered by it.
Yeah.
Everyone was just compassionate and understanding. And I was just thinking to myself, what is it that I'm so triggered with right now? And I realized that it bothered me that she wasn't apologizing for her
behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, I grew up with this, I'm grumpy, but I'm fine. You don't need to take care of me. It's don't worry about it.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So if I'm ever in a bad mood, I would just say, I'm grumpy, but I'm fine. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Because my Enneagram type is a type 8, and I just feel like I can take care of myself, and I don't want your help. Right?
Yeah.
And so I realized in that moment, there's something in me that's actually jealous of the fact that she can just express herself and own it and not have to apologize for it. So it was actually jealousy that was showing up for me that was making me feel triggered by that. And as soon as I sort of did that inner work, 2 minutes within the meeting, I was like, okay. I did the inner observer. I stepped back and I could just let it go.
And then you don't hold on to that anymore.
And now I know. I
wish more people would do that.
Yeah.
Be as perceptive. I think it's training. Like you have so much training. I think it'd take a long time to get to that point.
like, yeah, stepping back and like being like, why do I feel this way? Instead of being like, I automatically
Reactive.
hate this woman now.
Right. It's always
I
the
do that
other
all the
person.
time. I hate everyone.
Yeah. Well, and we often do that, right? We project our stuff onto other people all the time. Usually it's because we don't feel safe with ourselves.
Right.
When we can create secure attachment with ourselves, then those attachments with other people are going to come so much more naturally. They're not going to trigger us as much. And so this is really a map of how you can do that. The Enneagram gives you this beautiful sort of pathway of how you can get to know yourself enough that you're safe with yourself. When you're safe with yourself, you can be safe with others. So many of us are not safe with self. And
then we feel unsafe with others.
And then we feel unsafe with others. And our attachment strategies and all of that show up in all of that, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So going into the types, we tested and we found out our types. So can we kind of like delve into that and like just like the different elements and how they work, and maybe just like, because I know like going over the 9 types is a little bit daunting, but just kind of like go into each of our profiles and kind of like explaining them a little bit.
Yeah. What I can do is spend like 2 minutes going through like the 9 core desires if you want, and then we can jump into your 2. Does that feel okay?
Sounds good, yeah.
Okay. So the 9 types, they all have a core motivation, a core longing. And then typically the interesting thing about our core longing is that it's your focus of attention. And when your attention is focused on this core longing, meeting this core need that you have, you're usually living out your core fear in doing that. So we'll get into it with your types, but I'll share just kind of that core desire for every type. So type 1, their core desire is to be good and make the right decisions. They see the world as kind of black and white. Type 2, their core desire is to be loved and be lovable. Type 3, their core desire is to be valued and admired. Type 4's is to be unique and special. Type 5 is to be capable and to just kind of be able to do the thing and know the answers. Type 6 is to be safe and secure. Type 7 is freedom, to feel free. Type 8 is to sort of be in control of themselves and kind of have a protective nature of themselves and the people that they love around them. And type 9 is to feel at peace and have harmony. So when we are focused only on our core desire, oftentimes we're missing out on so many other things in the world, and we're actually trapping ourselves in the thing we're most afraid of. But we can talk about your types and so kind of see how that plays out. If you want.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
So who wants to go first?
Jaemie can go.
Thank you for offering that.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So Jaemie typed as a 7, right? Yeah. So I sent you guys 2 kinds of tests. I sent you a multiple choice test, and I sent you what's called a paragraph typing test. I prefer, and I typically use something more like the paragraph typing test, but truly the best way to get your Enneagram type is to do a typing interview with a professional. So the tests are a great place to start, but don't hold them too tightly because we don't know for sure.
And it's like your perception of self versus like someone really like understanding.
Yes. And when you're answering a test, oftentimes we answer it kind of based on who we want to be, not who we are, or who kind of how we're feeling that day or in that moment, not kind of the longitudinal experience of our life, right? And so just kind of hold it open with an open hand. But you typed as a type 7, and a type 7's core longing is for freedom and fun, and their core fear is sort of to be trapped or stuck even in boredom. So any type of pain, so not just physical pain but emotional pain, boredom, anything that makes them feel trapped, right? But what we're saying is typically when you're so focused on your core longing, you're actually living out your core fear. So a type 7, they're constantly looking ahead outside of the present moment to try and find the next thing that they can do, which is actually the thing that's trapping them the most because they can't be present with themselves.
In the moment.
Right? And so they can't actually enjoy the present moment because they're constantly thinking about the next fun thing to do, which is the trap, right? And their kind of core vice. So there's these vices that every Enneagram type has is actually gluttony, which sounds like this big, scary, deadly sin kind of word. But what it means is just, I need more.
Okay.
I need just more. This isn't enough. I need more. And it's because what I have is too scary. What I have is I might have to face something painful in the present moment. So I'm going to constantly think outside of myself to the next thing with a positive spin, right?
Yeah.
With a positive outlook on life so that you would never know that they're so afraid.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm naming all your stuff right now.
No, it's like funny because we did a dating episode too, and she was like, "You're afraid of like your vision of relationships is like a loss of freedom."
Yes.
And so this is a reoccurring theme for me. So now I know I'm really afraid of not having freedom.
And you are a 7.
Yeah. But the beauty is that it's actually leaning into your greatest discomfort that's going to be freedom. So
I have to be free.
To be truly free, you have to lean into the fear of not being free, right? Into the present moment. To really, truly feel freedom, you have to know what pain is, right? You have to, like, discomfort is truly the gateway to healing for type 7s.
Okay.
Really leading into that discomfort.
So like, how do I do that?
Because you're going to experience then inner freedom.
Okay.
The reason why you haven't felt freedom yet is because you're looking for it outside of yourself, right? Your growth edge is going to be looking for freedom within.
Okay.
Just being okay with yourself. Lots of type 7s, when they're constantly kind of projecting onto the next thing, and it's always with this positive spin, cup half full kind of life, they're actually missing out on half the human experience with grief and sadness and anger and
So I need
pain.
to like feel my feels.
Yeah, you got to feel all those. You're great at feeling the joy, right?
Yeah.
But it's going to be in leaning into those other things that you're avoiding because they feel scary, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be your growth edge. That's going to be the thing that's kind of creating you to be the person that you already are, but doesn't have all of these protective layers anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And could I be a 7? I know I keep trying to not be a 7. Could I be a 7 because of like previous trauma and maybe I'm not actually a 7?
Well, so you might be living out 7 strategies. 7 type strategies, and you're another number, but you probably won't even be able to access that journey until you really try on the 7 and do the work of the 7.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'll come to a point where it's, I was actually just using these strategies
As like coping.
And this isn't actually my core fear.
Yeah.
This isn't actually the core thing that I'm living out of. Yeah. Who knows?
No,
right?
it does make sense right now, but I'm just thinking of like just based on like my previous experience, and like I think because like in my previous relationship I felt like very trapped, and so like now it seems like it's almost like a very like an over compensating amount of like need for like freedom and autonomy.
Right. Yeah. But I'm so curious what your strategies were when you were younger, like as a kid and as a teenager. Did you have similar sort of needs for freedom and fun?
Yes. I think my parents were like very lax, which was nice. Like my brother was like kind of nerdy, and so like he never did anything bad. And so my parents expected like for me not to be like he never abused his freedom, I guess. So he didn't have any constraints on him. Like he never had a curfew or anything, but he was always like pretty responsible. And I was kind of like the opposite. Like I wouldn't come home for days on the weekends. Like I just like hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
They like got me a cell phone because they couldn't find me. And my sister's like so annoyed about it like to this day because like she had a curfew because of me. Like
That's
basically
so funny.
like they like gave my brother all the freedom and then they thought it was gonna be the same with me. I was like way too wild. They were like not a chance. And then my sister had like so many rules.
I love it.
So she was so annoyed about it because like I think they were like, well, it's too late now.
Yeah.
But no, definitely. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's not. I'm just in denial about it.
Well, I'm not. You're the one who said maybe. I never said maybe I'm right. That's a projection on my chair.
No, that's fair.
Maybe you're right. Who knows? Yeah, we don't know. Yeah,
I'm really working
But
through it.
typically, when you're very uncomfortable with the type that's presented to you, that's a good sign that we're not far off. right?
Okay, that's
because
fair.
it really does paint for you the things that you probably deep down have a hard time with about yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so much more structure to it too. Like the way that you described a little bit of your maybe opposition. And I'm a parenting coach, so I love hearing things like this. But there's like wings to our type. So the numbers on either side of your type. So if you're a 7, then 8, I'm like, what comes after 7? 8, and then 6. And and that's just kind of taking strategies from those types. So you might look more like a 6 or more like an 8. The way that you just described it, my guess would be kind of like a 7 with an 8 wing.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So should we do type 9?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ready, Vanessa?
I'm ready.
How are you feeling? Yeah.
I'm a bit nervous.
Yeah. So type 9, their greatest longing is for peace and for harmony. And there really is this deep fear of conflict, both inner conflict and external conflict. And what can happen with a type 9 in their sort of seeking for peace is they do this thing that we call, I mean, really the layman's term for it is just narking out. You kind of just go into this shutdown mode of maybe if I just don't show up emotionally, then I won't have to feel any of that conflict. So I'm not going to share my opinion. I'm not going to share, my thoughts or feelings here. Everybody else's opinions and thoughts and feelings matter more than mine anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And they have this real belief, and they live from this belief of my presence doesn't really matter anyways. Right?
Yeah.
And the problem is when you're doing that, when you're constantly focused on this need for peace, is you are creating the conflict that you're so afraid of, because we need conflict for connection.
Right.
There's conflict in every interaction. It doesn't always have to be big disagreements or arguments, but we're human beings that come at the world with so many different, perspectives. There's going to be like little bits of conflict. There might be lots of things that I'm saying right now that feel yucky. That's inner conflict.
Yeah.
Right? And so type 9 would like almost just power it down. Nope, don't want to feel that. But when we do that, we're creating conflict because the other people in our lives need that to feel connected. And a type 9's greatest desire is to be connected with other people. So they disconnect from themselves in order to try and make that happen, but it's creating this like negative feedback loop for them.
Yeah.
Does that feel true for you?
Identify with that?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like when if we're out with like a big group of people, I'm like quiet a lot. So it's kind of, I always hear people like, well, you never talk, you never speak. Or even like growing up, like like eating dinner as a family, my dad would be like, oh, you're not talking. Why aren't you talking? And I'm like internally, I don't know if it's like anxiety, but I just I just feel uncomfortable sometimes.
Well, the more that they say you're not talking is creating that even more for you to like shut down even more. Yeah. And the growth edge for a type 9 is to recognize that your presence matters and that it's needed and wanted. And actually the type 9, when they are living in their most resourceful sort of strategies, these are people who can solve world conflicts, like, because they can truly see from every person's perspective because they've spent so much of their life just kind of observing, and just like, what do other people need? I'll sort of dilute myself and then show up for other people.
Yeah, like be malleable.
Yeah, pretty much is what I do.
And so, but when they're living really resourcefully and they're willing to show up more actively in their life, they can be really powerful mediators, problem solvers. They are actually the best at like solving conflict situations because they can access that inner observer a lot easier than some of the other types can, because they've kind of been doing it their whole life just in unresourceful ways, right? So your growth edge is, again, instead of seeking peace, it's showing up as yourself in maybe uncomfortable interactions with people.
Yeah.
And not shutting yourself down. And you can do that with really small little steps, right? Just sharing your opinion. When people ask you, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? Have an answer or give 2 options, right?
Yeah.
And then have some, then 2 options is a good place to start, right? For a type 9.
Not
Dip your toe in. Just dip the toe in slow, right? And then take note, access that inner observer and take note, how did that feel? How did that make me feel in my body to have an opinion about something? And it didn't cause the kind of conflict that I was so afraid that it might cause.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I just showed up as myself. And so every time you can step back and you can sort of access those that inner observer and note, how did it make me feel? That's going to be the thing that's really going to help you lean into that growth edge. One of the beautiful things about the Enneagram is our centers of intelligence. And so we have 3 centers. We have, most people think in the world, well, in the Western world, this isn't true for all of the world, but we only have 1, which is like our head center, our brain center, but we actually have 3. We've got our heart center and we've got our body center, and they're all equally as important.
And so the third one's your mind or your head.
Yeah, well, they're all equally as important.
Okay.
Most people think they are head-centered people because, well, yeah, I overthink things all the time.
Yeah.
But when you actually check in with yourself, so many of us are not making decisions from our thinking mind first. You're making decisions based on how you're feeling, or you're making decisions just kind of based on your core instincts, right? So a type 7 is in the head center, but they kind of use their thinking brain unproductively because they're only always thinking ahead. They're not thinking about now, and they're not accessing how do I feel in the present moment, because that's a little scary to feel painful things.
Yeah.
And what do I want to do right now? Oh, I just want to move forward.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas their body might actually be saying, no, can we just stop? Can we just be still? Can we just slow down?
Yeah.
So it's accessing and integrating the feeling center and that body center for you that's going to help you with the growth. And a type 9 is actually in the body center, but they narc themselves out so much that they are very unaware of their own body a lot of the times. And so it's kind of like this push and pull for them, where at the end of the day, they do know what they want to do before they have to think about it or even feel about it. They do kind of know, but
they don't give in to it.
They don't
Or
know
don't
what to
say
do
it.
with it. Yeah. But usually their instincts are right. Right? And so, but if you were to check in with your heart and check in with your head, then it almost gives your body that permission to then follow and say, okay, we are going to trust you. We are going to trust sort of that instinct, right? And so it's really in balancing those 3 centers that we can truly find growth.
Okay. So like if you were to work with us, let's say, in like helping us work through this, like what does that process usually look like? How do you kind of like work with your clients to kind of help them use Enneagram in their lives, I guess?
Oh, that's a great question. So it really depends
on the person.
On the person.
That's fair. Yeah.
So yeah, clients typically come in because they're needing help with something, right? And so I tend to go really slow. And I use the Enneagram. And then what's beautiful about the Enneagram actually is that a whole bunch of other therapeutic and coaching modalities fit really well within its complex system. So I use an attachment perspective in my work, which very much fits in with Enneagram language. So when I know somebody's Enneagram type, then we can start working on their attachment needs, maybe their attachment stances, which is kind of this.
So is this like attached, like secure, avoidant?
Yeah. Dismissive attachment, and so there's 4. There's
okay.
So there's
that we're talking about.
There's secure attachment, which is about 50% of the Western population. Even if you grew up in not so great homes, we are just really resilient people. 50% are typically securely attached, and it's on a spectrum. So you might have some avoidant behaviors or some anxious behaviors, and then there's anxious attachment, there's avoidant attachment, and there's dismissive avoidant or dismissive anxious. It's disorganized attachment. It's kind of like a mix between the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then would a 9 be?
Well, I mean, it depends again on your childhood, on how many strategies you use. You can have a lot of secure attachment, and then still have some things you struggle with that show up with your Enneagram type, right?
Yeah.
Or you can have insecure attachment, but have so many secure strategies because you've done a lot of inner work.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't even know necessarily that you have insecure attachment until maybe something comes up, like a uncomfortable piece of news or something really hard shows up in your life, where you're just going to naturally fall back into your insecure attachment strategies that are going to look like your Enneagram type.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, this is just the beauty of this kind of work. So it looks different for everybody who comes in,
Totally,
but I do a lot of work with attachment, and then using the Enneagram as sort of like this oil painting that shows the map of all of these different things. Another strategy that I use, or another modality that I use, is called IFS, Internal Family Systems, which is...
I don't know that one.
Yeah. So you know how we have our external family systems? So family systems theory is a theory where it's like, these are the people in my life. These are my parents and my siblings and my grandparents, and then my community and my culture, and it kind of moves out from there. And then we study how those things impact people. Internal family systems is the same idea, but it's all inside. So we have all of these parts that show up and protect us from really things that they're afraid of happening to us. And so a lot of the times with your Enneagram type, it gives us language for what parts you might have, right? So it's likely that a type 7 is going to have this avoidant part that wants to protect you from feeling pain, right?
Yeah,
and so what we do, and we're told in this kind of self-help culture world of like, we just gotta, get past these saboteurs, these these things in us that are self-sabotage. But the real work is actually in befriending those things and getting to know them and figuring out why they're there in the first place, what they're protecting you from, and then helping them trust you, which is what is building the secure attachment within yourself. Yeah. When they can trust you, so it can move aside, and then you find that inner freedom. And the Enneagram work gives you that almost just like a shorthand, this beautiful shorthand to do all of this work. Yeah. Right? Oh, I could just talk about this forever.
No, I just love it. That are like a better match. Like, should a type 1 always be with a type 8? Or I'm just throwing this out here. But like, are there certain pairings that are like ideal? Or is it not like horoscopes?
It's not like horoscopes. No. So this question is actually so common, and it gets asked, like, I'm pretty sure on every single Enneagram podcast, this question has been asked out there. So the answer is no. Any type can be with any type. I do think there's something to be said for, certain type structures, maybe having more things in common sometimes. Because we know like type 9 and type 2, for example, are often mistyped as each other. And so they're going to have similar strategies of how to get their needs met in the world. That could cause big problems in relationships, or it could cause like...
Because it's like really, 2 people pleasers, or 2 very like nurturing kind of like avoid
but they're
conflict
nurturing
people.
For different reasons, right? So if they were having a family dinner, the 2 would be in the kitchen cooking and serving because they, have this need to be loved and needed, whereas the 9 would be in the kitchen cooking and serving because they just want to avoid everybody.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
But no, any type can be with any other type on the Enneagram. And you can have challenges with any pairings, and you can have a lot of growth with any pairing. It really just depends on your own inner work. And that's the beauty of the Enneagram. The more work that you do with yourself, the less you're going to need to use your type strategies to feel safe in the world, because you're going to feel safe with yourself. Yeah, totally. Right? And so it's actually in letting go of your type structure where there's freedom. So it gives you your type structure, and it can be really easy to use it as a party trick and kind of have fun with it. Yeah. But what we don't want to do is just say, I'm just doing that because I'm such a type 8.
Like dismissing it.
Because it's like, but you actually don't need to be doing that. Yeah. It's showing you that you don't need, that's what you do, but you don't have to. Yeah, totally. Right? There are other ways to kind of find strategies to get your needs met.
Yeah. Right? So do you usually have couples come in and then you type them both and then that's like a way to like effectively communicate, is like find out the root of your type? Or
it is so powerful. Yeah. Okay. It's so powerful. This whole concept with couples is I believe it's life-changing. There's a concept within the Enneagram called conflict styles. So when you can understand your conflict style and the way that you're reacting during conflict, even just the knowledge of it just creates breathing room within relationship. Like, okay, they're just reacting in that way because that's just what comes so naturally for them.
Yeah.
And the more that you can understand another person, the more you can have compassion for them. And that's the real work in all of this, right? Is like learning to have compassion for other people. And it's actually you can learn to understand and have compassion for anybody doing this work, even people that you could never ever,
because like you understand like the root of their motivation, so it helps you identify better with them.
Okay. And even when we start to hear people's experiences and their traumas, and then how they've had to use these coping strategies to stay alive, like our brain is adapted to keep us alive, not to make us happy. Right. So it's going to use coping strategies that are going to help us feel safe and keep us alive, right? Not to help us, thrive and grow in our personal development and self-mastery. No, that's right. We're not self-actualized yet.
It'd be so easy.
Maybe 2 million years from now, our brains will adapt to that, right?
Oh my gosh,
it hasn't happened yet. So we're still living a lot of the times from that archaic kind of place, right? And when we go into hyper or hypoarousal, like that fight or flight or freeze, then we're going to start using these coping strategies more, and you'll see it more in your life and in the people around you in their life too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I feel like they should have this. Everyone should do a test.
Everyone should. Everybody should. It's so powerful.
In work? Yeah. No, I think it makes sense in work. Like I know in work we did like the Myers-Briggs one, because then it was like good for like communication styles too. Because like some people's communication style is like on like a Teams message, they want you to be like, how was your day? And then like after tell you like what they need.
Yeah.
Like they need that personal touch, where some people is like, I'm too busy, like literally just ask me what you need. I don't need like the nicety. And so it was like, that was a good exercise to like know who likes like the human connection. Cause like I'm not the human connection person. I'm like, just get in, tell me what you need. Let me do it. I don't need like the niceties or you to like type hey and then wait for me to respond back hey, and then we do this like exchange. Like it just seems for me like not a good use of time, but it's nice to know. And then like it makes those relationships healthier, at least like in the workplace. Like
because there's so many toxic work environments that I keep hearing about, like in office environments, and like you automatically like
speaking from experience.
Well, yeah, of course I'm speaking from experience, because I worked at a law firm and it was like very like cliquey, and everyone had their own.
It's like Mean Girls all over again.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice like if like someone like you came in and talked about it, then people could step back and not just automatically judge Jane over there for saying she's had a bad day.
The Enneagram is really powerful for teams. I've done a couple of team workshops for companies and schools and that type of thing. And for one, it's a fun sort of workshop that you can do with a group. So it's not like they drag their feet there because they're like, okay, another lecture, whatever.
Yeah,
but then when
like
they get there and they see how fun it is, and I always have lots of fun little things for everybody. But then you start to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
And you start to learn about everybody around you. And I've worked with teams before where what they'll do after is on their office doors, they'll put their type.
Oh, interesting.
And then so when people come to visit, like to go down the hall to, ask a question, they can be reminded, oh, okay, so this is a type 2. Yeah. This is kind of how communicating with a type 2 might be helpful for them. And so you kind of learn how to communicate to a type and then how to communicate as that type. Being interviews actually is, even if we don't nail down on a type, usually what you do is you nail down on what we call a triad.
Yeah.
And so there's all of these different triads within the Enneagram. The intelligence centers is one of them. Conflict centers aren't triads, but it is a group of 3. Like there's 3 people in the positive outlook group, 3 people in the reactive group, and 3 people in the competency group. But there's all these triads that are actually connected on the symbol. Stances is another one. Stances is kind of like like a karate stance, like what your body looks like. So a stance is the idea of what other people might perceive you as is how you take action in the world.
Okay.
Right? So are you kind of forward, future? Are you more withdrawing? Or are you more kind of dependent on what the situation is, would be a stance. And there's so many of them, of these different triads. And so if we can narrow down a triad, then it will just give us more information about kind of how you perceive the world. So it's okay if you don't know your type right away.
Yeah.
Because we can typically narrow down a triad. I love using intelligence centers. That's my favorite one to use. It just makes a lot of sense. I always say to people, imagine that you've been given like a disappointing piece of news, and how you might first process that internally is going to tell you your intelligence center. Yeah. So do you process it with your feelings? With, how do I feel about this? And there's kind of this underlying concept of shame attached to that. Like, I should have done something differently, or, I could be doing this instead, that type of thing. That's kind of like your heart center. If you process with your kind of you just know what to do and you don't really think about it at all. That's more of your body center. Like you don't feel anything, you don't think it, you just kind of hop into action. And then and they have more of like an underlying connection with anger. Not like they're angry people, but they just sort of get it. Like the type 8, the anger is always there. It's like this intensity. And the type 1, they're in the body triad too. They wouldn't, because it's not good to be angry. They might say something like, I'm frustrated or I'm irritated, but it's anger, right? And a type 9, like we were talking about, they're in the body center, but they're kind of removed from their own anger. But they kind of have this like blowhole where it just, once it pens up, it'll explode really quickly, but then it'll be a surprise to everybody, including themselves, and then they'll go back down again. You're like, where'd that come from?
To put something in your backpack?
Like, oh yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah, so it's all connected. And then there's the head center, which has this kind of underlying connection with fear. Like, so if you can kind of tune yourself into, am I more connected with fear, with shame, or with anger? That's going to tell you your intelligence center you use primarily.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think yours is? I'm trying to think.
Oh God, I couldn't even tell you. I don't know.
Well, 9 is in the body center.
Yeah.
So you would be more connected with anger, but again, it wouldn't show up in the way that we think anger is. You're almost so connected, you're disconnected to it as a 9, right? You're disconnected from anything that could cause conflict.
Yeah. It's like I feel it, but I don't acknowledge it.
Yeah. They're a little bit more passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Because, makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And then 7s are in the head center. They're more connected to fear, right? So for a 7, it might look more like a fear of missing out.
Okay. I used to have a really hard time, like fear of missing out was something in high school I really struggled with. Like there was never something I didn't want to do. But I feel like now as I get older, I like love sleeping. So I don't have that as much.
Yeah. Yeah. But what about with things around like traveling or relationships or
like if someone else is going on a trip, I want to go, or...
Yeah, or do you find yourself like you went on a trip and you come home and you're doing your work again and you're just planning your next one?
Yes, definitely. Like when I got home from like Bali, I was like, okay, now I need to like plan my summer and like figure it all out. That's actually what I did last night. I like booked all my flights for like the stuff I have. Like I have like weddings and stuff to go to in the summer. So I was like, I need to like organize my calendar.
So a good sort of practice for type 7 would be to practice being still.
Okay.
And sort of quieting down their mind a little bit, and what is it like to be in the present moment, just right now?
Yeah.
What am I feeling? Even just sensations, if you can't access a feeling,
Yeah.
just sensing in your body just right now, just being with that for a moment.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And because it's probably been a long time since you'd even do that, right?
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, yeah. A practice for a type 9 is in that body center is it's type 9s are kind of hard to explain because they do this narking. It's almost like they have an addiction to meditation, but not meditation in the sort of way, but meditation in the let's shut everything down sort of way. And they keep themselves busy by doing a lot of things, but they're not actually the thing that they need to be doing most, which is like accessing themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I'm just going to tinker. My husband's a type 9 and he just tinkers. Like he just all day long, he's tinkering. And I'm just like, will you just stop and be still and talk about what you're feeling?
Yeah, I cannot stop and be still. Like when I got home from the trip, I was sitting there and I was like, this is very uncomfortable. I have to get out and leave. Or I just started cleaning randomly.
Because it's always an uncomfortable feeling coming home from a big trip, right? Like your serotonin levels were really high. It was really exciting. And you come home, it's a little bit depressing, right?
Like back to the mundane.
Yeah. And so 7 and 9 would both have a really hard time with that. Yeah.
Interesting. So like you mentioned your husband's like a 9. Like is there ways that you feel like Enneagram's been helpful in like your own personal life and like I guess parenting in general?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Like in every way humanly possible. Yes. So I'm a type 8 on the Enneagram, which is they call the challenger. And what that means is my kind of greatest need is to protect myself and the people that I love. And my growth edge is to lean into vulnerability because in protecting myself, I feel like I can never be weak, right? But it's actually my greatest strength to recognize my weakness. Like my greatest strength is to be vulnerable, right? And so I can like be very quick to anger, be very quick to, which for type 9, my husband would just make it's like he's turtles right back into his little shell, right? And so before we knew this Enneagram concept, that's what our fights would look like. I was very reactive. Yeah. And I had to I was angry and he needed to know about it. Yeah. There was just no other option.
And then he's just dismissive about it because he wants you to be happy.
Yeah, feels very dismissive, which makes me more reactive.
Totally.
Which makes him more dismissive, right? Yeah. And then we're just living out of these behaviors and we're not even accessing what we're actually feeling, right? Like my reactivity often comes from feeling abandoned or something, and his sort of dismissiveness comes from feeling attacked. So if you have those two things on the attack, you're feeling abandoned right now. Ooh, you're feeling attacked right now. You can much more likely have a better conversation and healing in relationship when you can name that instead of you're being a jerk right now.
Totally. Right. Yeah. It's more like conducive to like a good discussion versus just like.
And then understanding what the other person needs too. So I'm a quick processor. I know how, especially with anger, I know how I feel within 5 seconds of something happening. I know that made me angry. He needs to know it made me angry. Once he knows it made me angry, then I won't be angry anymore. And I'm fine. Right? Most people like they don't want to hear that you're mad at them all the time, right? And so my husband though is a slower processor. He hasn't had as much practice in knowing what he's feeling, right? And so when I'm expecting a reaction from him so quickly all the time, and not only can he not give it because he's conflict avoidant, he doesn't know what he's feeling. Yeah. So when he says, I don't know, I have to believe him.
And like have compassion for that. Totally.
Yeah. And then he's had to learn that you can't just shut it down and pretend it never happened and not come back to this conversation. So we kind of have this agreement in our relationship now where if something shows up where it made me upset or made him upset, we say there's this thing that we have feelings about, and we pause because he needs the time to process it, but he has to promise to come back to it.
Okay, that's like a good arrangement for sure. Yeah.
And if he
Does he
doesn't
come
come back
back?
to it, then I get to be angry.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But no, we both had to learn. Like, I've had to learn to give him space, and he's had to learn to show up when he promises he will, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because his desire would be, let's just pretend this fight never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we can just move on, but that never works, right? Because then you're just
like
building
boils up more and more.
Yeah.
And I think there's like this gender, and this might be like a gender bias, but usually like men are like flight and women are like fight. And so like sometimes it always ends up to be like the woman like wants to talk about it and the man's just like, nah. So I think that like kind of layers into it.
Maybe in a sense of like wanting to share the feeling more so. Yeah. And I think, gender is such a tricky one because even on the Enneagram, like a type 8 male is more acceptable in the world than a type 8 female.
Interesting.
Right? Like we're in this culture where they're allowed to be, that's Taylor Swift song.
Yeah.
The what is it? Bad.
Something
The
man.
Bad Blood. Is that no? Not Bad Blood. I'm singing. Here we go. Yeah.
I know the music video where
Yes.
she's like walking up all these
Yeah,
steps.
the man. Want to be a man. The man one. The man one.
Okay.
Yeah, the man Taylor Swift video.
Song.
Yeah.
Song.
Yeah.
Is
If
all
I Was a
about
Man.
This. If I was a man.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift. Yeah.
Oh.
That song is all about this. If I was a man, I could get away with all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a woman, I can't. And that's true for like a type 8 woman. So type 8 woman, oftentimes we have created strategies to not be quite as intense, to not be quite as impactful in the world, but we're just simmering underneath. And then it's the same for like a type 2 or a type 4 male is not as acceptable in the world, right? Like we live in a culture where for men to be super vulnerable and share their feelings and be really nurturing and caring is sometimes even seen as creepy, right? And
Yeah, totally. Well, I'd like to think that it's like come away now.
Yeah.
a little
Hopefully
bit.
we're getting
like
there.
we're course correcting a little bit.
Hopefully we're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally. That makes
But
sense.
yeah, that can happen a lot, right? And type 7s are typically, again, they're usually more, it's type 7 men seem to be celebrated, like they're fun and they're goofy and they can just get away with more, whereas a type 7 woman who wants to be fun and goofy and not have to worry about things is like, oh, well, they're not being responsible, right? Especially if you're a parent. So
interesting.
Yeah, there's both of you guys are in the positive outlook conflict style
Oh,
group.
interesting.
So in conflict, you like a type 7, they would go to this, you can be angry, but I'm not angry. I'm fine, right? And a type 9 would kind of more be like, what conflict?
I don't see any conflict.
Yeah, I don't see any conflict, right?
I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. And a type 8 is in the reactive group, right? And so it's not that they are running around being mad at people all the time, but it's like, I'm angry and I just kind of want people to know about it and then I can move on, right? Which can trigger all of the back and forth and all of that, right? And so, type 8 bosses, especially women, if they're healthy, are like, I'm a type 8, so there we go. But
No bias at all.
yeah. But no, if they're good, like resourceful.
No, that was like a positive thing for sure. Like she definitely was like, and she's like just really good at like advocating for her team because
they're
she is
true
just
advocates.
like, totally.
And that's who they are at the core because that vulnerability piece, they just want to take care of the people in their life. They just want to
100%,
protect them and they don't want them to have to feel betrayed in any sort of way. And so, but it can create a lot of burnout because type 8s think that they can take care of everybody else all the time in that particular way, like just defending them and advocating for them.
And then they're not taking care of themselves, really.
Yeah. And it's, again, like it's in recognizing, no, being vulnerable is a strength for you.
Yeah.
That you can grow, right? So, but that's the scariest thing for type 8 is to be vulnerable. Oh man, I did therapy for 2 years before I told my therapist like any real about me.
Oh, really?
Sorry, and stuff about me. Like, because I was just like, ooh, that vulnerability piece was.
Yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Well, that's how I felt when I went to a counselor. Like every time I go there, I'm like, I have nothing to say. I don't want to. And then she like try and talk to me, and I just either make a joke or I just felt uncomfortable, and I was like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, that's what I love about internal family systems work, actually, is because you don't have to talk about your own story or your own stuff. You don't have to come, with something to talk about in therapy, which can be really scary for people, right? Like, totally. I don't know what I want to talk about. But like if you, for example, were to come see me and you're like, well, I don't know, I'm just kind of feeling uncomfortable right now. I'd be like, okay, so let's work with that uncomfortable part. What do you think it's protecting you from? Like, why do you think it needs to be so uncomfortable to keep you safe right now? What's it trying to tell you that uncomfortable energy needs to be so big right now?
Yeah.
And so you can just kind of work in, that's what I love about it.
So you don't really have to work through go through all your trauma or you kind of just have to understand your behaviors and then go from there.
Yeah. Well, what your behaviors, how your behaviors are showing up in a way that it's protective, and understanding what they're protecting you from is going to be that kind of gateway for healing work. That's what I love about doing somatic stuff and embodied stuff too, because you don't have to ever talk about your trauma in order to heal from it when you are working in the body.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, because you can just feel where it is in your body.
And then you can work with it using parts language like IFS without actually having to re-traumatize or tell the story again. Yeah. Yeah. Like your sensing body, we have our thinking body and our sensing. Your sensing body processes 2 million bits of information every second. Your thinking brain processes 40. So I love my thinking brain and I'm thankful for it. But we live most of the time up there, and there's so much more going on in here that it's never computing. So if we can just drop down into our sensing body, we don't actually have to use this to bring healing, to actually integrate the work that we're doing in our life.
No, that's like a reoccurring theme too, because we just met with a counselor and she has a similar kind of way of working through things. It's not actually reliving all the trauma, but it's just working through when you have those feelings and how to reassess it, I guess.
It's powerful stuff. Yeah, it really is.
So if someone wants to kind of dip their feet in Enneagram, what is kind of a good starting off point, or what would you recommend people do as their path towards it?
It depends on if they want to spend money or not. So I always recommend booking a typing interview with a professional, because that's really going to get you to narrow down on your Enneagram type, or at least top 2 types. To a degree where it's pretty likely. It's not just taking a test and we're unsure. And then you can go and do some of your own research from there. Or you can continue working with somebody to do that integration work and learning all about yourself in that way. There's also some tests online you can take, which again is a great starting place. But to just know that, like anything else, it can be weaponized, right? The Enneagram can be weaponized like any other tool out there. And one of the ways that it's weaponized is when you learn your type and then you just kind of
accept it.
Yeah. That's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And don't refuse to change.
What it's supposed to do, work through it.
Or you're mean about it with other people. Such a
type 9.
Yeah. Type of 7 thing for you to say.
Yeah.
Right? That's not work.
Yeah.
That's not, if you're not doing compassion work, you're not doing the work, really. Yeah. And but it's a good place to start. And there are so many great podcasts, so many great books. Obviously, I always recommend working with somebody, but it's not feasible for everyone, and that's okay. There's lots of options out there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Is there anything you feel like we didn't cover? Or
no, I think
I wanted to touch on.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. So if people want to learn more about you and kind of your work, where's the best place that they can reach you or use
time, right?
Yeah.
So my website is evitawellness.ca, or you can find me on Instagram at Evita_wellness. And I work with 2 practices. So I work with a practice in BC here in Abbotsford called Expression Wellness. And so it's mostly therapists, and then I'm a coach there. And then I work with a practice in Maryland as well, called Wellness & Co. And I'm a coach there as well. And so typically I book through, if you're American, I book through the American one. If you're Canadian, I book through the Canadian one. Yeah, and then sometimes I have clients on my own if it doesn't fit into those two buckets. Yeah. So yeah, you can find me on any of those websites, but also my own.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. We learned so much.
Or DM me on Instagram. That's usually actually the best way to do it. It's just find me on Instagram.
Slide into the DMs.
That's actually how Vanessa and I met.
I met so many people on Instagram. It's like such great networking.
I feel like it's becoming more common.
Yeah, totally.
Especially through COVID, right? It's
definitely. Well, thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks for having me. That was so much fun.
That was interesting.
Yeah. Anytime you want to know more, just hit me up. I love it. Talk about this all day.